Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Faith by Hearing podcast. For those of you listening on YouTube, thank you for tuning in to part 2 of the What Would You Like Me to Do For You series. This is, again, part 2, and I am teaching you 3 things to know before you answer Jesus. Last time we talked about how you have to understand what you're asking for. And I would go into depth and go in and briefly talk about it. But, there is just the other video, the other podcast, depending on which platform you're listening to. So, I would leave you up to that. I would recommend watching the first part just because it'll give you a basic understanding of the next part of where I'm coming from. So, if you haven't watched that already, I would recommend going and watching that back. So, the first part, again, is understand what you're asking for. That's not just, I'm going to ask this thing. What does that mean, basically? And the second part is what we're going to go on today. But before we do that, I want to invite you, if you've not already, to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment something down below that you learned. Either, if you are learning something now, then write it down in the comments and let me know that you learned something, because honestly, it would make my day. So, also, if you are listening on podcasts, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and you guys are going to get some exclusive content that is only going to be posted on the podcast channel. That's not on YouTube. That's not anywhere else. It's only going to be through podcasts like on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So, if you are not subscribed to those podcast channels, and I am working on getting Amazon Music, like an Amazon podcast thing. I'm working on getting that there. So, the only 2 that are open currently is Apple Music and Spotify. So, if you are not subscribed, I would highly encourage you to do so, because I'm going to be teaching you, I'm going to slow down a second, because I'm going to be teaching you very important things that you need to know in your Christian life that will help you in your walk, that will help you grow, and will help you mature as a Christian. With all that said, let's get into part number 2 of what would you like me to do for you? This is the second thing that you need to know before you answer Jesus. And I'm going to start in Mark chapter 10 and starting at verse 46. Now, if you watched the first part, you'll realize that this is very, very close to the scripture where we started last time. And that was Mark 10:35. I should know this. It's right in front of me. It was Mark 10:35, and this time we're going to start at Mark 10:46. So this is right after James and John have made their request to Jesus, and Jesus says, "What would you like me to do for you?" So this is immediately right after this. So I'm going to start reading in verse 46 in the New Living Translation. Then they, meaning the disciples and Jesus, they reached Jericho. And as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of Nazareth, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Why the sudden change in attitude? That's just my thought. We're going to continue reading. Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. There it is again. What do you want me to do for you? In red letters, so don't tell me that I'm making something up. It's in red letters right here. Right there. What does he say? "My rabbi, I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." And instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. Blind Bartimaeus had not 1 but 2 problems. Number 1, Bartimaeus was blind. Number 2, Bartimaeus was poor. How do we know this? Blind Bartimaeus. It's what it's what they say that he was in the Bible. But he was also called a beggar. And a beggar normally will not have money. And if someone who has a lot of money is begging, I'm worried for their sanity a little bit. Like if we're really gonna think about it here, and hear me out. If someone who is rich goes out and goes on the street wearing raggedy clothes and wearing a cloak that the government gave you so then you could legally beg from people, and you're like, I really need your money. I really need it because I'm poor and I can't get places. Imagine if you recognized the person. Imagine if you recognized the person. You would have been like, what's that over there? Like, is he okay? Is she okay? Doesn't she have okay, here, imagine it's Elon Musk, who is the owner of Tesla and SpaceX and now owns Twitter, which is known as X. Imagine if he went out and just sat on the side of the road, put on this raggedy cloak, and was begging for people's change. Are you gonna look at him and go, oh, it's Elon Musk? You're not, no. You're gonna look at him and go, what the heck is Elon Musk doing begging for money? Is he okay? Is he okay? Because you're going to know that that person is known for having a lot of money, known for being very successful. And here he is on the side of the road. That's the thing. Bartimaeus, he was blind and he was a beggar, meaning that he did not have the money. He did not have the money, so he had 2 problems. And those were the 2 problems. And whenever Jesus asked him, what would you like me to do for you? He asked for not money. He didn't ask for a job. He asked for his eyesight. Why? Because it was a higher priority to him. And so he received the greater miracle. The greater miracle was not, I'm blind, I don't really want to beg anymore, so I want a job. That wasn't the miracle. The miracle was, I have my sight. And that leads me to what number 2 is. The point number 2. 3 things you need to know before you answer Jesus. Know what your priorities are. Write that down. Number 2, know what your priorities are. Bartimaeus had his priorities, and he said, I want to see more than I want money right now. Likely he reasoned within himself, if I can see, that means I can go and get a job and go and get money. So it was not a question for him what he wanted to ask for. He said, this is my priority, so this is what I'm going to ask for. And that's exactly what he got. Now I want to show you someone else who did not have their priorities in order, so you can see the comparison. We're going to go to John chapter 5, starting at verse 1. And I'm going to read in the New King James Version. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethsaida, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man, and this is the guy we're talking about, now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and he knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, Jesus said to him, do you want to be made well? Jesus takes a little bit of a different approach for what would you like me to do for you? He says, he goes and tries to help the man prioritize his with his prioritization of what he wants. And he focuses it on healing. Do you want to be made well? Do you want good health? And the sick man answered him, verse 7, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. It was a yes or no question, and the dude gave this long and probably exasperated response of why he wasn't well. Not why he not if he wanted to be well. That's just the question Jesus asked him. Do you want to be made well? And he says, nobody helps me into the pool. It's like, stay on topic. Why could he not stay on topic? We're going to keep reading. Jesus said to him, and I like this, because Jesus says, I have the faith that you don't have, so I'm going to use it. So Jesus said to him, Rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. I do want to preface, in the New King James Version, in the book of John, it's often translated as the Jews. In the New Living Translation, it's translated as the Jewish leaders, or the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the leaders of the Jewish people. That would be religious, like the religious leaders of the Jewish people. So, it's not just some people around who were like, what are you doing? It was the leaders. The Jews, the leaders of the Jews, therefore said to him who was cured, It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them, He who made me well said to me, Take up your bed and walk. I'm going to page flip. Then they asked him, Who is the man who said to you, Take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. The man departed and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. What was the problem with this man's priorities? Number one, he didn't understand Jesus' initial question because he was blinded by his negative mentality. He had a negative mentality. He had a victim mentality. He's like, somebody else gets there before me. Somebody else. Every time I see the water ripple, someone else is there. And I'm not because I'm crippled. And so that was all that he thought about. That's a victim mentality. That is a negative mentality. And that was blocking his priorities. That was messing up his priorities. Number two, this guy cared more about what the Jewish priests and the Jewish leaders had to say than what Jesus told him, than what Jesus did for him. Because what does he do? Number one, he says to them, the man who healed me told me to pick up my mat. Not, oh, sorry. I've been lying here for 38 years. Don't know if you noticed. And I'm standing and walking around now. Sorry. I didn't know that it was like that bad for me, someone who's been on the floor lying on that bed for 38 years, to pick it up and start walking. Sorry. Didn't know if you saw me there for nearly 4 frickin' decades. No, what does he say? He says he blames it on Jesus. He's like, well, the man who made me well told me to do it. You know who else used that excuse? Eve. She says the serpent, and even Adam too. Adam goes, what? God's like, why did you sin and eat the fruit? And Adam's like, it was the woman you gave me. And Eve was like, it was the serpent who deceived me. Okay? quit the blame game. The blame game is here, and I'm not here for it. Okay, I am not here for the blame game. This guy had a problem with negative thoughts and victim mentalities, so he was playing the blame game, and on top of that, he goes to the religious leaders and tells them it was Jesus who healed him, instead of being like these guys, like, they didn't appreciate that I've been healed of an infirmity from 38 years. And still, he goes back to them. Why? Because he valued the opinions of the Jewish leaders. So this guy did not prioritize well at all. And we don't read anything else about him in Scripture. So we don't even know if he ended up keeping his healing, because Jesus says, "Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." So we don't know what happened to him. But now that I've shown you a horrible example of someone's prioritization and somebody's backbone, I want to show you a great example of somebody having a backbone that I want to meet this guy whenever I go to heaven. So we're going to turn over a couple pages to John chapter 9, and we're going to go to verse 24, which I almost got there, and I didn't. John chapter 9, verse 24, and actually I have it in the NLT, so I'm going to switch over because the NLT is a little easier for me to read. And also I find it easier to understand. John chapter 9, verse 24. So for the second time, here's a little bit of context. This man was born blind, and Jesus came and healed him of it. And the religious leaders are asking him, "How were you made well? How were you made well? What is, like, it can't be Jesus. It can't be Jesus." But we're going to see what this guy does to demonstrate that he's got a backbone. And I love to read this. So for the second time, the Jewish leaders called the man who had been blind. They called in that man and told him, "God should get the glory for this, because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner." "I don't know whether he is a sinner," the man replied. "But I know this, I was blind and now I can see." "But what did he do?" they asked. "How did he heal you?" "Look," the man exclaimed, "I told you once. Didn't you listen?" Oh, oh my goodness, just the sheer that this guy is coming across to these guys, because he's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? I already told you. Do you have short-term memory loss? Are you okay? Do I need to tell you again, like you're forgetting things? Huh?" He doesn't even end there. He says, "I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" But they cursed him and said, "You are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from." "Why, that's very strange," the man replied. I love this guy. He's so great. Why, that's very strange. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. We know, oh my gosh, this guy is well learned as well. This guy knows what he's talking about. "We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it." "You were born a total sinner." What a turnaround. They answered, "Are you trying to teach us?" And they threw him out of the synagogue. He got thrown out because he said that Jesus was from God. This guy had a backbone. And what else did this guy have? Good priorities. The Jewish leaders prioritized their tradition and Moses and the laws that were given by Moses. as clearly as they said, we are disciples of Moses. Okay, calm down. Moses has been dead for a very long time, and we'll say we'll say 700 plus years. Let's chill down a little bit, okay? He's been dead. I'm sorry to tell you. Anyway, I might have taken that a bit too far, but because the Jewish leaders prioritized incorrectly, Jesus couldn't do anything for them but cause trouble. For those of you listening at the podcast, there's quotes with cause trouble. Because Jesus was just doing God's work, and they were like, what's he doing? What's it? Traditions. Why are you breaking them? Huh? Why are you breaking the traditions? And Jesus is like, you broke my father's heart. You broke his will. So I'm gonna mess with you as much as I can. So, that is a great example of a backbone, and that's why this guy, I want to meet him in heaven. He's got great priorities because he prioritized the Word of God, and he prioritized what seemed to be the truth to him, which is the truth, which was that Jesus was actually sent from God because he did something that no one else had ever done. Now we're going to go, and I'm going to, 21 minutes. I hope you guys are in for a longer one because I'm only halfway through. Okay. 1 Kings chapter 3. And I restarted this because I was like, it's going to go a bit longer. And I was like, let's aim for 25 minutes. Not going to happen this time, guys. I'm sorry. I have too much to say on these things. So, we're going to be in for a little bit of a longer one. We're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 3. Why am I in 2 Samuel? 1 Kings chapter 3. And for the sake of time, I'm going to read a couple verses at a time. So, verse 3. Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burned incense at the local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon, so the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That takes so long if you read the book of Leviticus. So long. That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "What do you want? Ask and I will give it to you." Old Testament, not just New Testament, we in the Old Testament. And Solomon says, verse 9, "Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours?" Verse 10, "The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, 'Because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and have not asked for a long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart such as no one has ever or ever will have. I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands as your father David did, I will give you a long life." King Solomon prioritized wisdom over health, riches, fame, long life, victory over enemies. He prioritized wisdom, and so that's exactly what he got. But here's the catch. If you prioritize well, it is pleasing to God, and he'll want to give you even more. How do I know this? Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, King James. "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." What things are those? The things that the unbelievers seek after, those who are of this world, that's what they seek after. Fame, money, peace, love, abundance, joy, doing like sign language. Joy, and so many other things that all these people want. All of these things that people seek after and devour and desire. God will just, pop, it's right there for you. You say, God, I want to bring more people into your kingdom. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll help you do that. Plop, here's some money to do that. You're like, God, I wanna put on this show for you. I wanna not like a weird show, but like I wanna do a Bible study, we'll say. I'm gonna change subjects from show. I wanna do a Bible study so that I can teach people what your word really says. Oh, you do? Uh-huh. Here's some very influential people. Of course, it's gonna vary depending on how much God can trust you, and that's a whole other topic in and of itself, which we can go over if you guys want to know, which I might just go over anyway, because I know what you guys ought to know. So, and I don't say that with pride. I say it because people need to know this stuff. If they're going to live the best life that they ever can, they're gonna need to know how to do these things. But God will add these things unto you. It will be easy to get them. Because God will just go, oh, you plus, boom. Because you pleased me. And what you asked for, how you live. So, there's one other person I want to show you about priorities. And it's kind of a neutral one. But I want to show you this anyhow because it's important. And it's in the New King James. We're actually going to do pretty well with time, which is good. I thought we were going to get to like 45 minutes. Oh, camera. I thought we were going to get to like 45 minutes, and we're not. So, that is good, because the first take of the first episode was 35, and the second one was 45. So, we are doing better, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, no, this would have been the third take, and the second take was incomplete. I'm talking so that I can find where this is. Okay. Verse 1. 2 Kings 4, verse 1 in the New King James. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets. Whoa. That's like reading the genealogies. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. So Elisha said to her, What shall I do for you? Elisha wasn't God, but he was a prophet. In the Old Testament, they were called seers, because they would see, God would give them like visions and things to see that people, normal everyday people, wouldn't have been able to see. But Elisha is basically an extension of God. So he's saying, What shall I do for you? Hey, what would you like me to do for you? Old Testament. Tell me, continuing, verse 2, Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels, and set aside the full ones. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. And he said to her, There is not another vessel. So the oil ceased to flow. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil, and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on what is left over. This woman had a different priority than the verses that we had read previously, and that priority was finances. Now notice, Elisha didn't reprimand her, but instead he asked her how he could help. He asked her a question to begin solving the problem. And she says that I'm in a lot of debt, I'm in trouble, I need help. And when you tell God what you want, like this woman did. This woman said, I want help to not have my sons be taken away to work off the debt that I have. I'd rather just pay it off and have my sons to take care of me, because otherwise she would have been like alone. She would have had no one to rely on. And so that was the problem. And so she told the man of God what she wanted. And when you tell God what you want, you need to be, I'm talking to you, you need to be prepared and ready to do what he tells you to do. This woman was fully ready, fully prepared, and she went and said, okay, I see what you're saying. I'm going to go and do it exactly as you just said, because this is my priority to get my finances in order, because this is my priority to obey the voice of God. And I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to go and do it. And that's exactly what she did. And guess what? Her problem got solved. Her sons didn't have to be taken away as slaves to, well, it's like indentured servitude. It's not slaves like we read about in America. I don't have to send my sons away. I don't have to worry about this debt. I'm taken care of because I listened to the man of God and what he had to say to fix my situation. Now, that is all I have on point number 2, which was know what your priorities are. I hope you guys were taking notes. I want to know what you learned, so put in the comments what you learned. If you're listening on the podcast, I would encourage you to leave a review. That's a way to let me know, like, if you've learned, what you've learned from me. Even though there's only been 2 podcasts out, but that is going to change very quickly. And if you want me to look into something and you want to know something in the Bible, you don't understand what it means, you want me to do a teaching on it, then also I'd encourage you, 1, if you're on YouTube, just put it in the comments. I'll see it. Number 2, if you would reach out to me on social media, which includes Instagram, again, I had said it earlier, which is Margaret Faith FT. If you would go and reach out to me there, put a DM to me, would be the fastest way to do that. And share, if you enjoyed, share the podcast. Honestly, like, if you enjoyed and you want people to listen to what I said, I feel honored. Then I hope that you would learn something from this. That's all I gotta say. So we'll see you next time at the Faith by Hearing podcast, brought to you by Faith Ministries. No, Faith Today Ministries. How did I mess up my own ministry name? Well, interesting. We'll see you guys next time. Remember to subscribe to the podcast channel to get exclusive podcast content. We'll see you guys next week.